Good evening. I'm Michael Grossmann from the 5,000 Poems Collective. Also from the collectives are here in the panel Tim Blunk. You will see him later on in the hall. And Stella, and she will translate from German in English and English in German. Will be translating it. And Christian, our technician, without a picture. The other activists like Henning and Jihad, they will introduce themselves. It's the best thing, I think. On my T-shirt, and I think it's a very strange frame, is esse est percipi. It's a Latin phrase. It means to be is to be perceived. For us, this means people who are locked away simply disappear. This is especially relevant concerning political prisoners, of course. And to prevent this disappearance, it is especially necessary for movements like the ones joining us tonight, thank you for this, of course, to exist and to highlight them, the activists and their work. They will do it then. One common topic of the people joining us in the case of is the case of Munir Abu Jamal, which will be discussed later by Jihad Abdul Mamid, Tim Blunk and the Rote Hilfe, and Henning from the Rote Hilfe. Tim is linked to Munir as he curated an art exhibition with Jihad out of prison to raise awareness for the case and eventually prevented Munir from being executed. They will tell you a nice story then. Further will be explained by the activists. There can be overlapping points between activism and art, like the 5,000 poems happening. But the paradox of art is that it generates its own reality through mirroring the actual reality. That generates an aesthetic semblance, nothing more. Like Shakespeare said, this life is a tale told by an idiot. The truth is concrete. Therefore, actions like Tim's and the work done by Jihad and the Jerichomovement and Henning and the Rote Hilfe can actually have a real effect. First, due to our European time, over to Henning now from the Rote Hilfe. Thank you so much, and it's up to you now, Henning.
Über die Einladung heute Abend und werde gleich erstmal unsere Organisation, die Rote Hilfe, vorstellen und dann auch ein paar Entwicklungen zum Thema politische Gefangene, die es hier in Deutschland gibt. Ich freue mich sehr, heute mit den Aktivisten aus den USA zusammen eine Veranstaltung zu machen. Danke, dass das ermöglicht wurde. Uns verbindet eine lange Zusammenarbeit in der Solidarität mit Mumia Abu Jamal und Leonard Peltier. Und ich hoffe auf eine schöne Veranstaltung und eine sehr gute Diskussion. Und ich möchte mich sehr bei Stella für die Übersetzung bedanken.
Okay, so the topic that will be addressed by Henning is political prisoners in Germany. He's very happy about the opportunity to be connecting with Tim and Jihad and all the other activists. They are linked in solidarity with Mumia Abu Jamal and Leonard Peltier. So let's start the discussion. Or Henning, let's start with you, I guess.
Ich werde zuerst ein bisschen die Rote Hilfe vorstellen. Wir sind ein bundesweiter, deutschlandweiter Verein, den es irgendwie hier seit inzwischen 40 Jahren gibt. Wir sind entstanden aus, also wir feiern dieses Jahr ein 100-jährigen runden Geburtstag. 1925 gründeten sich die ersten Rote-Hilfe-Komitees. Ja, also damals noch in der Weimarer Republik, vor dem Hintergrund der tobenden Klassenkämpfe und Zehntausenden politischen Gefangenen. Und damals gab es Hunderttausende Rote-Hilfe-Mitglieder, prominente Unterstützer, die ihr vielleicht auch kennt, so zum Beispiel Käthe Kollwitz, Albert Einstein, die sich eben auch für die Rote Hilfe und für die Freiheit der damaligen politischen Gefangenen stark gemacht haben. Wir sehen uns in der politischen Nachfolge der historischen Roten Hilfe, die von den Nazis zerschlagen wurde, die aber bis in die späten 30er Jahre noch Menschen verstecken und außer Landes bringen konnte, und organisieren heute Solidarität mit politischen Gefangenen und Menschen, die von Repressionen auch auf Demonstrationen zum Beispiel betroffen sind.
Okay, so the Rote Hilfe is a nationwide organization, which was, as it is today, founded about 40 years ago, but it developed from an organization that now is turning 100 years old. And for example, in 1925, first committees of the Rote Hilfe established themselves, which was then still in the Weimarer Republik. There were about like 10,000 political prisoners, and they had supporters like Käthe Kollwitz and Albert Einstein. And today they are focusing on the political legacy of the Rote Hilfe, which was actually destroyed by the Nazis, but still hid people until the late 1930s. And today they're standing in solidarity with political prisoners and people who are facing repression in the context of demonstrations and so on.
Um sich eine Vorstellung zu machen, in welcher Größe wir arbeiten. Wir haben heute deutschlandweit um die 50 Ortsgruppen und rund 13.000 Mitglieder. Wir sind natürlich eine Mitgliedsorganisation. Darüber hinaus finanzieren wir uns von Spenden. Wir sind staatlich unabhängig. Der Staat gibt uns nichts, ganz im Gegenteil. Er mag uns nicht besonders und das ist auch ganz gut so. Sondern wir sind tatsächlich ein unabhängiger Verein. Ein sehr wichtiger Anspruch von uns ist, dass wir strömungsübergreifend und pluralistisch arbeiten. Wir sind eine Solidaritätsorganisation für alle Linken. Ja, das können feministische Bewegungen sein, Menschen mit gewerkschaftlichem Hintergrund, Antifaschistinnen und Antifaschisten, Menschen, die internationalistisch arbeiten. Die Klimabewegung bekommt immer mehr Bedeutung. Ne? Das bedeutet auch mehr Repression. Auch da haben wir viele Mitglieder und viele andere mehr. So arbeiten wir. Wir sind ein sehr pluralistischer Verein. Und unser Anspruch ist, auch wenn Linke verschiedene Analysen haben und sich manchmal vielleicht auch in der Alltagspolitik unterscheiden, im Fall von Repression, wollen wir mit dazu beitragen, dass alle zusammenstehen und dass wir uns kollektiv gegen staatliche Angriffe wehren können.
So to give a bit of an estimate of the size of the Rote Hilfe today, there are about 50 local groups and they have about 13,000 participants in total. They are independent from the state, which is actually good because in fact the state doesn't really like them. But they are mostly financed through donations and because of their participants. What is important is that they are a pluralistic organization and they work through overlapping a lot of different movements. Like there might be feminist movements, there's also the climate movement, other anti-fascist movements, there might be internationalistic movements. So even though that left movements might be different in what they stand for, they're united in that they can all face repression, and it's important for the Rote Hilfe to unite them in solidarity and stand together against that repression.
Die Mitgliedsbeiträge und die Spenden sorgen dafür, dass wir politische Prozesse begleiten können. Wir sind in der Lage, im Normalfall 50% aller Prozesskosten zu übernehmen und in Härtefällen sogar noch ein bisschen mehr. Wir vermitteln linke Anwältinnen und machen Solidaritätskampagnen. Ja, wir sind zum Beispiel auch gegen jede Form von Gesetzesverschärfungen. In meinem Bundesland soll es gerade ein neues Versammlungsgesetz geben, das sich sehr gegen linke Demonstrantinnen und Demonstranten richtet. Und da halten wir mit vielen anderen Initiativen dagegen und sagen, nein, wir wollen frei demonstrieren, wir wollen keine Repression und keine Überwachung. Das ist Teil unserer Arbeit und sehr wichtig. Ich weiß nicht, wie das in Amerika mit dem Rechtssystem ist. Wir raten immer allen Menschen, verweigert die Aussage. Ihr seid nicht verpflichtet, dabei zu helfen, euch selber verurteilen zu lassen, sondern ihr müsst euch nur politisch vor Gericht verteidigen und ihr müsst vor allen Dingen eben auch solidarisch mit anderen sein. Das ist auf der Straße so und das ist auch später so, wenn es zu einem Gerichtsprozess kommt. Darüber hinaus bieten wir Workshops an, wie Menschen ihre Rechte auf Demonstrationen und politischen Aktionen wahrnehmen können und informieren darüber, was sie an möglicher Repression erwarten können.
So about the participating fees and the donations, they accompany political processes. They are able to fund about 50% of the costs that occur in such processes. In like serious cases, that might be more. And for instance, they connect people to leftist lawyers, and they do campaigns for solidarity, and they stand against any form of like making laws more serious. Like for example, in Henning's hometown, or in Henning's state, there is currently a new law being established which makes it harder for left people to organize demonstrations, also in terms of surveillance and everything. And they always tell people that they are not obliged to tell people anything. They do not have to say anything. They're only obliged to defend themselves politically in court, but they do not have to help convict themselves in a way. So they also do workshops about how they can stand for their rights and how they can use their rights, and also how they can be solidary with others. And they also do campaigns on what forms of oppression they might be facing.
Ich möchte das an zwei Themenkomplexen ein bisschen verdeutlichen. Sicher wisst ihr, dass es hier in der BRD einen starken Rechtsruck gibt, sowohl im Parlament durch die AfD, aber auch auf der Straße gibt es eine Menge rechte und militante Neonazis, die eine reale Gefahr für Migrantinnen sind, für alle Menschen sind, die nicht in das Weltbild der Rechten passen. Und es gibt Protest von Antifaschistinnen und Antifaschisten. Es ist so, dass zum Beispiel eine junge Aktivistin, Lina, aus der Stadt Leipzig, vor rund einem halben Jahr festgenommen wurde. Mit einem riesen medialen Aufwand wurde sie zur Quasi-Terroristin erklärt, weil sie eben angeblich Straftaten begangen haben soll. Und diese mediale Kampagne lehnen wir natürlich ab. Wir arbeiten dagegen und fordern, dass Lina freigelassen wird und dass aufgehört wird, Antifaschisten zu kriminalisieren.
To highlight that on two subjects, first of all, there is a big move to like the political spectrum on the right at the moment in Germany in general. For instance, through the AfD, which is the right-wing party in the German parliament, and also just simply on the street, we have more militant right-wing people, also neo-Nazis, who are a real danger for migrants and all kinds of people who don't fit their vision of the world. So of course there's protests by anti-fascist groups. And for instance, a young activist called Lina from Leipzig was actually arrested, and there was a huge media attention to that case, and they really turned her into that kind of terrorist through the media, which the Rote Hilfe is of course fighting against, and they are working for that Lina will be liberated and not convicted.
In einem anderen Teil von Deutschland, in Stuttgart, das ist in Süddeutschland, gibt es die beiden Aktivisten Jo und Die. Jo und Die wird vorgeworfen, in einer Auseinandersetzung mit Neonazis gewesen zu sein. Sie haben mehrere Monate in Haft verbracht deswegen. Ja, also während Rechte, auch Corona-Leugner zu Tausenden in Stuttgart demonstrieren können, wurden diese beiden eben inhaftiert, stehen jetzt vor Gericht. Gerade in den letzten Wochen kamen mehrere neue Erkenntnisse auch ans Licht durch Zeugenaussagen, dass die Anklage, so wie sie ist, wahrscheinlich auch gar nicht stichhaltig ist. Nichtsdestotrotz, sie sind aktive Antifaschisten, das streiten sie auch gar nicht ab, aber sie wurden eben auch für Monate gefangen gehalten. Das ist eine Tendenz, die sich hier gerade in Deutschland etabliert, der wir entgegenwirken wollen. Dafür haben wir eine Kampagne gestartet und diese Kampagne heißt: Wir sind alle Antifa, wir sind alle links, um eben zu zeigen, muss gar nicht wirklich in der Antifa sein, sondern du kannst auch in der Gewerkschaft sein, du kannst irgendwie einfach in irgendeiner demokratischen Initiative sein, aber dass der Antifaschismus und das aktive Eintreten gegen rechts eine legitime Aktivität ist, Rassismus, Islamfeindlichkeit, Antisemitismus aktiv irgendwie zu bekämpfen, das finden wir richtig und da sind wir solidarisch und das ist eben Teil unserer politischen Auseinandersetzung mit den Behörden.
The second case occurred in Stuttgart, which is in southern Germany, concerning two activists called Jo and D. And they apparently were in a confrontation with neo-Nazis and were arrested and spent several months in jail. So while corona deniers can demonstrate with like thousands and thousands of people, they had to go to jail for a few months, and actually they are now in court. And it has now become apparent that the case is not, that the case and the stuff they are said to have done is not really like with a lot of proof. So the Rote Hilfe is trying to work against this tendency of keeping people in jail for months if you don't really know what for, or if you don't really know if there's proof for it. So they started a campaign called "We Are All Anti-Fascists, We Are All Left." So that basically means you don't have to be an active anti-fascist to be against the right wing, to be against racism, to be against anti-Islamism and everything. So it's basically that you can be you can show solidarity with people who are attacked by racism and so on without having to be an actual anti-fascist, and that's something they stand for and they support.
Genau. Darüber hinaus ist es so, dass wir in Deutschland haben wir eine sehr aktive und starke kurdische Community, die politisch aktiv ist und natürlich gegen die Repression und den Krieg in der Türkei, aber auch in Syrien auf die Straße geht. Seit vielen Jahren ist es so, dass die kurdische Freiheitsbewegung hier in Deutschland kriminalisiert wird. Aktuell sitzen 10 Personen in Haft. Das ist aber ein permanenter Zustand. Wenn eine Person entlassen wird, gibt es die nächsten Verhaftungen. Erst vorgestern wurden in 2 Bundesländern wieder 2 kurdische Aktivisten verhaftet. Und sie werden des Terrorismus angeklagt in einer ausländischen terroristischen Vereinigung. Und das bedeutet mehrere Jahre Haft. Also wir sind der Meinung, das ist ein völkerrechtlicher Konflikt. Wir sind gegen die Kriminalisierung der kurdischen Freiheitsbewegung und versuchen, diese Prozesse solidarisch zu begleiten, Öffentlichkeitsarbeit zu machen und gegen dieses diffamierende Bild gegen die kurdische Bevölkerung aktiv zu sein.
In Germany, there's also quite a big Kurdish community, which is politically active. And of course, the Kurdish community stands against the war in especially Turkey and Syria. And the Kurdish freedom movement is criminalized in Germany. There are about 10 people in jail for that, but that's like a permanent thing. Like once one is released, another one is convicted. Just the day before yesterday, there were 2 Kurdish activists arrested, and they are said they're believed to be terrorists, which means several years in jail. So the Rote Hilfe stands against the criminalization of the Kurdish movement and tries to accompany those processes solidarically.
Um das vielleicht noch mal ein bisschen zu verdeutlichen, das trifft auch türkische Kommunistinnen und Kommunisten, die hier in Deutschland im Exil sind. Es gab einen Prozess, der vor wenigen Monaten zu Ende gegangen ist, der sich über 4 Jahre gezogen hat, und den Genossen werden keine individuellen Straftaten angelastet, sondern es geht nur darum, sie dafür zu verurteilen, dass sie Veranstaltungen organisiert haben, Konzerte organisiert haben, Demonstrationen begleitet haben in verantwortlicher Position. Und das allein reicht, um Menschen dann zu kriminalisieren, wenn sie gegen das Erdogan-Regime in der Türkei aktiv sind, auch hier. Wir führen das darauf zurück, dass es natürlich eine sehr starke Zusammenarbeit zwischen der BRD und dem türkischen Regime gibt. Und das weisen wir zurück. Für uns ist das türkische Regime ein reaktionäres, autoritäres Regime. Und wir verteidigen natürlich das Recht der Geflüchteten und Migrantinnen, sich auch hier politisch zu äußern. Und haben auch da Publikationen gemacht, haben die Prozesse begleitet, haben Anwältinnen organisiert. Und all das ist Teil unseres internationalistischen Anspruchs.
Also, this repression also hits Turkish communists who might be in exile in Germany. There was a court case that ended a few months ago, which lasted about 4 years. And those activists weren't actually said to have committed individual crimes. They were just convicted for or arrested for organizing concerts, demonstrations, events, and everything, which is enough to be criminalized in Germany, because there's a strong connection and work connection between the German government and the Turkish regime, which the Rote Hilfe is distancing themselves from, obviously, because the Turkish regime is a repressive and totalitarian regime, and they fight for the right of the refugees and migrants. And in that particular case, they also organized lawyers and processes and did some publications.
Genau. Und um nochmal zum Ende eine unserer wichtigen Kampagnen darzustellen, das ist der 18. März. Der 18. März ist der internationale Tag der politischen Gefangenen, und ich hoffe, dass wir vielleicht in Zukunft auch gemeinsam mit den Genossen und Aktivisten in den USA da was zusammen machen können. Der 18. März ist ursprünglich der Tag der Pariser Kommune gewesen und wurde dann von der Kommunistischen Internationale in den 20er Jahren als Tag der politischen Gefangenen deklariert. Wir haben diesen Tag gemeinsam mit anderen Initiativen in den 90er Jahren wieder aufgegriffen und konnten in diesem Jahr den 25. Aktionstag auch begehen, und wir haben es geschafft, auch unter Corona eine Sonderzeitung rauszugeben mit rund 100.000 Exemplaren und über 30 Demonstrationen und Online-Veranstaltungen zu machen. Dort stellen wir verschiedene Solidaritätskampagnen für politische Gefangene vor, geben den Gefangenen, wenn es geht, auch selber eine Stimme und fordern selbstverständlich ihre Freiheit. Das ist eine der wichtigsten Arbeiten der Roten Hilfe. Und wir rufen immer dazu auf, den Gefangenen zu schreiben, mit politischen Gefangenen in Kontakt zu treten, und dass der Kampf gegen Repression und die Freiheit für die politischen Gefangenen Teil der allgemeinen linken politischen Arbeit ist, dass es alltäglich ist, sich eben auch gegen Repression zu wehren und nicht diejenigen zu vergessen, die aktuell eingesperrt sind.
To end on a little bit more actual note, there's a very important campaign, which is the 18th of March every year. It's the International Day of Political Prisoners. where he actually hopes to maybe be able to do some campaigns or actions in the future with the comrades from USA. It was originally the day of the Parisian Commune, and they declared it the day of political prisoners some time ago. They actually took that day like back into action in the 90s, and they celebrated their 25th year of campaigning in order of that day. For instance, they published a special edition of a newspaper with about 100,000 editions, and they organized about 30 demonstrations. And there were also online campaigns that fought for freedom for political prisoners, and it gave some attention to the case of political prisoners and the repression in general. And they always say that it's really important to fight against repression in general as a left activist, and also to write to political prisoners, get in contact with them. And while working on that fight against repression, do not forget about the people who are currently locked up in jail.
Genau. Damit will ich es erstmal bewenden lassen für den Moment. Vielleicht habt ihr Fragen an mich, und ansonsten bin ich gespannt auf eure Beiträge. Und erstmal vielen Dank auch für die Übersetzung, Stella.
So all of that for now, and he is excited to hear what you have to say. Maybe you have some questions for him. Yeah, let's get into discussion.
Well, first I'd like to say I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here, and I want to extend my love and solidarity and admiration to the Rote Hilfe and to Henning and to everyone who is participating in the international efforts to free political prisoners wherever you might be. I reach out, and to anyone who has any way to express this to any of the prisoners themselves. I know I speak for Jihad, Abdul Mumid also. We send our profound love and solidarity to you behind the walls, and we are here for you in whatever way we can be, and we will continue to be so. I wanted to talk just very, very briefly before handing it off to my comrade, to Jihad. I became a political activist first and foremost in an organization to support and free political prisoners. When I was in college, I was part of a group, and our first campaign was to demand the freedom of Assata Shakur. And I remember waking up one morning and being told that revolutionary activists from the Black Liberation Army had already taken care of that. So it was a victory that we shared in and continue to share in as she still remains free. Some of the very first political events I attended as a young activist was at a mass rally in Harlem in New York City when the Puerto Rican nationalists were released. 4 people who had done almost 30 years in jail, including Rafael Cancel Miranda and Lolita Lebron. I got to meet them. I was like a 19-year-old student. I got to shake their hands on stage. It was a profound and unbelievable experience, and was certainly formative in my development as a political person, as a political activist. I want to stress how important the work is that you are doing in support of political prisoners. It really is the heart of any resistance movement worthy of the name. And I can say, as someone who worked as a mass organizer and then in a guerrilla organization, in an armed clandestine formation, and then as a political prisoner and for 13 years and 7 years in solitary confinement, I can say that solidarity that comes from these organizations is just irreplaceable. And some of it's very, very basic and simple, like just having some commissary money to take care of basic needs, but the most important part of it is for the prisoners is you continue to be a political person because of the work that you do in Rote, Hilfe, and at other organizations. You get to continue to maintain your political identity, which is exactly what the state is trying to take away from you. So to be able to continue to have a life as a political person is what allows you to survive, and not just to survive, but to flourish even behind the walls. And if we are able to collectively continue to offer our comrades inside the opportunity to do that, we are not just saving them, we're saving ourselves, and we're saving the integrity of our movement. The other aspect of that is that the prisons are teeming now with political poets and political artists. I became an artist in prison, and I remember being interviewed. I was actually by a German journalist who asked me about my artwork in prison, and she said, "Oh, I see. It gives you something to do." And I said, "Well, actually, no. It's not about something to do. It gives me someone to be." And I have learned in the 30-some years since then, as I've continued to develop a career in the arts, it is a profound way to continue important political work on another level. Because at its essence, art is about continuing to create solidarity, human connection. In the African languages, the word Ubuntu, that sense of that interconnectedness of our humanity, the inextricable links that we share. And when you are a prisoner, it gets to the most essential aspect of what art making is about, as I've learned. When you make art, you're making gifts. Essentially, that's what you're doing. And you're either gifting it to people who helped you buy toothpaste. So in our cases as prisoners, you're sending things out that you make to thank the people that help you. Or you're sending out gifts, art objects, things that codify your creativity. You're sending out gifts to the world as an extension of our collective humanity. Things that will exist in conversation with other objects and with other people. And when I was in solitary confinement, I believe it was in 1988. I was in Marion, Illinois, and the state of Pennsylvania was moving very quickly to try to execute Mumia Abu Jamal. And as prisoners, we were trying to think of what we could possibly do to contribute to that. And several of us who were at both Lewisburg, Leavenworth, some of the women in the control unit in Lexington, Kentucky, we were able to correspond with each other, and we came up with this concept of creating an art exhibition. So I curated my first show from prison, from solitary, and I didn't even know that that's what it meant, but we created an art exhibition called Art Against Death. And we had correspondences with prisoners in 17 different countries around the world. And we collected artwork that became the basis of a traveling show that went around the United States and then traveled around Europe for several years. And I hope that it played some role in building some international recognition of Mumia's case and helped in some way to prevent him from being executed. Is some small way. Now I have to tell you about my comrade Jihad Abdul Mumit, who I did time with both, I think in 2 different locations, both in Leavenworth and in Lewisburg. And I know this brother as someone who is also an artist, a very gifted playwright. And I think both of us learned some profound lessons about what art can do in prison, but we realized that we could help save people's lives in prison. We were there in Lewisburg at the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic that was scorching the prisons and the jails at that time. In the DC jail, for example, we had an HIV positivity rate of 80% among men and I think, no, it was 80% among women and 40% among men. And that was then following into the penitentiaries. And there was a dramatic need to do what the prison administrations and the health services wouldn't do, which was to educate prisoners how to take care of ourselves and not get sick, and how to eliminate the stigma that created a violent situation for many of us who had HIV, that were afraid to talk about it or afraid to deal with it or had lost connections with our families. And Jihad wrote a play and organized a number of brothers from the prison population, and we staged this for the prisoners at Lewisburg as a way to just dramatize and educate the themes of how to take care of yourself and how to take care of each other. And we could not have done that without support from people on the outside. We were constantly in touch with doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners who also educated us about how to, what the standards were for care and treatment that existed on the street. And we were able to formulate demands of the prison system to force them to treat prisoners at that same level as was afforded to prisoners to citizens on the street. So I can say without a doubt that the combination of art and then solidarity from the organizations on the street, I'm sure that we were able to save people's lives. And the one other thing I'll tell you about Jihad, who was part of organizing that group that we had at Lewisburg, is that we're talking about now a lot of Nazis and white supremacists are coming into the prison systems. And I can bear witness to how those individuals can be transformed in prison. I've watched Jihad in 3 different occasions manage to get close to and convert dyed-in-the-wool, ideologically convinced white supremacists, Nazis, one guy who had torched synagogues in Chicago and was convicted of hate crimes of that nature. And I watched as he was able to convert them to human beings. And that's the character of Jihad Abdul Mumit, and he is now the leader of the Jerichomovement. He's a former Black Panther, former member of the Black Liberation Army, and is now the leader of the Jerichomovement, United to Free Political Prisoners of the United States. And it's such an honor to call him a friend and comrade. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to tell us. Jihad, it's for you.
Yeah, wow. Thank you, my comrade, Tim Blunk. My same feelings, I could give a lot of war stories about Tim also and his relationship to prisoners and what we did in prison. But before I do that, I want to start off by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. And assalamu alaikum to everyone. Greetings of peace to everyone. I thank Brother Michael Grossmann and Brother Henning and Sister Stella and everybody else that's been involved in bringing this presentation together. I salute you and very sincerely. And I was listening, Henning, when you were talking about the International Day of Political Prisoners, maybe before we get off, if you don't mind, talking about that again, because we would like to, from the United States, embrace that also in solidarity, just a little more understanding. But just with the little bit that you said, I'm right there with you. When I say I, representing as a representative of the movement, behind me. So anyway, Timmy Blunk, before I get into Jericho, just to give a little accolade to my comrade also, just to let you know how he was received by the other prisoners as a revolutionary, as a conscious, respected a prisoner, convict, as we used to say. They don't use that word too much anymore. But he would be the only white person in the gym playing basketball with teams of black teams. Just know he's the only white person in the gym, you know, and he was so respected, and people just, you know, and that was his welcoming. And where he walked, he was respected because of who he was and how he represented himself, what he stood for, what he talked about, what he believed in, and what he represented. So that was my comrade. So I'm equally honored to be your comrade too, my brother. So my name is Jihad Abdulhamid again. I am from New Jersey, Plainfield, actually. It's a small place, but it registered pretty high in the 1968 rebellions across the United States, as was recorded in the Kerner's report on civil disobedience, and whatever the name of that title of that book was. But there's a lot of militants and revolutionaries came out of this small place, very close to Newark, New Jersey. The listening audience may not know, I guess this is around the world, so you may heard of Plainfield. If you haven't, then you can mark it on, put it on your refrigerator, Plainfield, New Jersey, that you're going to check that place out. But I'm with a comrade that's also a member of the National Jerichomovement, comrade Ashanti Austin, who's also from Plainfield. So we have a long list of people from that area there. But I joined the Black Panther Party just as Mumia Abu-Jamal did when we were 16 years old. We were both born in 1954. He is a dear comrade of mine also. And I have a lot of comments to make in a relatively succinct period of time here. But yeah, Mumia is fighting for his very life. He's beset by a lot of medical conditions. The delay in getting him the treatment for the hepatitis C was so long in coming. Now he has damage to his liver. All right, even though he eventually received that treatment, he just had open heart surgery. He has a outrageous infection on his skin. And when he was operated with the open heart surgery, you know, he was shackled, manacled to the bed, as all prisoners really are. But so he's gone through a very inhumane situation and condition. The only resolve for that in addressing his health, his sanity, and who he is for his freedom, as it is with all political prisoners. So Jericho is an organization that was started in 1998. I was still in prison at that time. I did 23 years in prison. I came home in 2000, so I've been home for two decades now. Anyway, just for a listening audience to know, that was for bank expropriations to build the movement. I guess if you all know that's involved in the movement, in the heat of that in the late 60s and early 70s, you know, you don't finance a movement and raise a flag and declare anything on bake sales. So after the cookie bake sales are over with, we started going a little more heavier than that. Just I'll let you know, but that's what it was for. Somebody would say, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I know. You believe the story of the United States Marines because they're really on point. When you talk about the warriors coming out of the United States, you know, that really pick up weapons to fight against oppression at that time, you know, oh, no. You believe everything except what we're doing. And that is the narrative that's kind of like enslaved and painted the movement as criminal in the United States. As far as the government is concerned, there are no political prisoners in the United States. There are political prisoners in Germany, everywhere else, perhaps. They may acknowledge that. Quick to point out the flaws in your own country, your own lands, and what you're doing and what's going on. But the United States, pristine, clear, totally free, liberated. Everybody's happy. Idyllic type of situation, which we know truly that is not the case. To acknowledge that the fact that there are political prisoners in the United States will beg the question, well, why are there political prisoners in the United States? What is the condition? What is the political, economic, and social condition that would warrant somebody being incarcerated because of their politics? And so the United States shuts that off with a tremendous narrative that they're not. We are criminals. So, but the world doesn't necessarily believe that. But the world has a problem challenging that because the United States is the big boy on the block. And I'm talking about the world, I'm talking about governments. Even, you know, back in the early 60s, am I right, Tim? Correct me on it. But Haj Malik al-Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, you know, declared clearly for us to learn that this is not just a civil rights issue when it comes to the treatment of Black, brown, and indigenous people, and indeed all working class people. It's not just a civil rights issue, it is a human rights issue. And we should take this to the United Nations and declare it around the world. And so we're only looked as a minority when we looked at ourselves in the United States. But when we look at ourselves on the international stage, we're not necessarily a minority at all right? Well, some unique, and I'm speaking candidly, things is happening, with that. So the movement has taken on the trajectory of taking it to the United Nations. And we found out, to our chagrin, to our disappointment, how impotent the United Nations is when it comes up to challenging anything that a place called the United States of America does. It's just impotent. Matter of fact, I don't even think the United States just thumbs itself at the UN. I don't even know if it paid its dues or not. It's just an arrogant place, and it doesn't give it the respect. Now, the United States may use the United Nations as a voice to speak and condemn other countries, but it's not reciprocal coming to this. But nevertheless, as I talk, we continue to raise high the reality and the necessity of declaring what's happening to Black, brown, indigenous, and working class people in the United States as a human rights violation. This is a violation of our human rights. It is actually genocide in many, many respects, in all respects, actually. But also we recognize as a strategy, we may be attacking this on many other levels besides that. So, but the Jericho movement, when we say we support political prisoners, we say that we support all political prisoners. Those that stood up for freedom and justice and fought at that particular time, mostly economically, for a socialist government in the United States. Not only the Black Panther Party was a Marxist-Leninist organization. I guess our Bible then was Mao Zedong's Red Book, the quotations of Mao. And we followed that line of thought. And so many of the prisoners still in confined or Muslims, Black Panthers, Black Liberation Army members. We have anti-imperialists, and we have one brother, dear brother, Jan Lyman, who's been down over 3 decades now. He comes home tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So the fact that he's coming home doesn't speak anything about justice. Justice denied is justice delayed is justice denied. And the fact that his time ran out, just like me coming home with Tim, we went to the parole board. It's not like they just let us go, oh, okay, you deserve to be home. It wasn't like that. So the few of us that are home, most of them in most cases, because about the sentence structure that we had that allowed us to come home on that. It's no favor at all from the government, even though there have been some that was pardoned by Bill Clinton, particularly the Puerto Rican nationalists. And on the Barack Obama's last day, he had pardoned Oscar Lopez Rivera, who's also my comrade, and Tim's comrade, and Chelsea Manning. So in any event, when we say we support political prisoners, we're talking about, as I think Henning was saying also, we provide logistical support also. We write them. We involve them in our organizing and our strategies. We invite their suggestions and their input. We provide finances for commissaries, Tim was pointing out. We help family visit. We visit. We help raise money for lawyers. We help raise money so that when they come home, they will have some money, to get back into some type of a living situation that is conducive and humane. And we do all these type of things. We have food packages. We have third-party doctor intervention. We are connected with many law firms across the United States to render support. I'm also on the board of the Abolitionist Law Center. I don't know if you know that, Tim, in Pittsburgh. As a matter of fact, they spearheaded the suit that won the case to get Mumia Abu Jamal the medical treatment for his hepatitis C and for anybody else for that matter. And they were connected also with the suit to get a lot of the political prisoners out of long-term solitary confinement, including Russell Maroon Schultz, who was in solitary confinement. We talk about 3 decades. All right. So this is the type of work that Jericho does. It is a vanguard organization champion the cause of freedom for all political prisoners. And if anything, and if it was not for that, many of the names of these warriors would have been forgotten. So the least thing that we can do, is lift high the legacy. So as Tim said, we, so that they'd be recognized as human beings in the struggle, that the government will not be successful in eliminating these individuals from the psyche and minds of the movement for people to learn from and to embrace as time goes on moving forward. So Jericho was started, just one more tidbit about Jericho. It was started in 1998 by Bubba Herman Ferguson and Sister Safia Bukhari. Both of them have passed away. And by recently released political prisoner Jalil Muttaqin, who is home now for well over a year. These are the individuals that started it. Jericho is an organization that's primarily led by former political prisoners. That's unique within itself, is political prisoners are in the ranks, in the staff, if you want to use the nonprofit word. They're in the ranks of leadership of the Jericho movement. So the ones that we represent are in the movement, along with all of those that come along to embrace, which we love and we need so importantly. One of the things that Jericho does, and I talk, Henning, make sure that you hear me about bringing back the International Day of Political Prison, because that international connection is very important. But the conditions that resulted in our freedom fighters being incarcerated, regardless if they took an action against the government or regardless if there was frames set up, like Mumia really didn't do it, Imam Jamil Al-Amin didn't do it, and now you're facing life sentences, or if you actually committed an action in the movement, we don't focus on the guilt or innocence. Now, legally, that's the strategy, obviously, if somebody's trying to get out. But as a movement and educating people, you know, we're not focusing on the guilt or innocent of our freedom fighter. It's like asking about the guilt or innocent of Nat Turner. You look at Nat Turner, when you look at Nat Turner in a history book and you see him, is he a criminal or is he a hero? The fact that he killed the slave master, what does he make him to you here, 300 some years, 200 some years removed from that? How do you look at that? And if you look at him as a criminal in a history book, reading that about him, that means you look at us as criminals too. And you need to really reevaluate that. So you cannot champion freedom fighters throughout history and all around the world, and then not champion those that's right under in your midst, in your own community that comes from you, to champion them. So we tried our best, and I think we were very successful, along with many other organizations, something that Henning and Timmy said also, as far as working with other organizations. I think Stella, when you're bringing it out in English, you were saying how you network with many different other organizations. Well, Jericho does the same thing. There are other organizations that admirably deal with the cause of campaigning to free political prisoners. And we work with all of them. There's a network of organizations. We just don't do it alone. We're not the only one in the spotlight. So I champion all those organizations that work with political prisoners, and those may be included Anarchist Black Cross, the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, the Malcolm X Commemoration Movement, the Northeast Political Coalition, Political Prisoner Coalition, any organization that does that. We work with them, and we have chapters, Jericho chapters all throughout the United States. And so that's what we do. Those conditions that we were in prison for, they still exist today. Many of us were in prison because of a program by the FBI called the Counterintelligence Program. The Counterintelligence Program. They call it COINTELPRO. That's the acronym for that. Counterintelligence Program. COINTELPRO is a program designed by the FBI to make sure that there's no Black leadership, or as they say, a messiah to rise out of the people. And they would do everything to destabilize the movement. And there was a senator out the Midwest, Frank Church, that brought to Congress that the counterintelligence program of skullduggery, lie, deception, deceit, framing, setting up people, and even killing people was illegal. And Congress had this hearing, as in the 60s, or late 60s, they call it the Church Senate hearings in the Senate. COINTELPRO is illegal, but there was no action done in terms of even slapping the hands of the culprits of that. It's just declared illegal. So it kind of like fades, and it comes back in even more profound manner by any other name. Now, every last one of those tactics, Every last one of those tactics that the counterintelligence program did that was deemed illegal by the United States Congress, the Senate, is legal today. And many of the same conditions exist today. The killing of police, I know even from Germany or for wherever we're looking at right now, you see the news happening in the United States. And because of the advent of the cell phone and the camera, we see just how outrageous, ridiculous, how pervasive it is every single day. That Black and brown and indigenous people are victimized by racist police violence in the United States. Now you say, was this happening more and more? No, probably not. Now you have a camera to witness it. Before, somebody gets shot 41 times or whatever the case may be, or get shot in the back of the head, or bust into somebody's apartment like Breonna Taylor, or have their knee on somebody's neck like George Floyd. Well, the knee has been on a lot of people's necks for a long time. There are a lot of bodies at the bottom of the Mississippi River and every other river in a place called the United States of America. A lot of people have been hung by trees, castrated, physically, politically, economically, socially, by this government, and it continues to exist. And every day, even with going back to the question of political prisoners, even when talking to people today, schools, colleges, or whatever the case be, guess what? When we talk about our freedom fighters in prison, we almost have to start all the way back in time with the slave revolts and why standing up and fighting for your freedom is important. And this happened and that happened. And today we have political prisoners, we have prisoners of war, we have freedom fighters, because that just speaks to how successful the United States was able to paint a narrative of all of us being to criminalize the movement. And not only that, sisters and brothers, they're doing it now with the activists in the Black Lives Matter movement that's getting arrested in the streets. Many of them are faced with very serious charges. They are criminals. Then that's how it will be recorded as far as the United States government is concerned. And I give this warning to all of us listening in the United States. As Timmy said, supporting political prisoners has to be synchronized, has to be centerpiece to any movement that profess liberation and freedom for its people. You cannot have a legitimate movement and every time somebody gets arrested and every time somebody gets confined and decades go by and you don't represent them, you just constantly out there, yeah, freedom, defund the police. And here you got people that are rotten in the prison, because a lot of these freedom fighters we're talking about now, you do the math, we're talking about getting arrested in the 70s. Well, what year is it now, by the way? So we're talking about 50 years. So in prison, and defund the police, and even though that's unnecessary, so don't get it wrong. Yes, keep up that, but it has to be somewhere. That's a cornerstone. If you're catching the corner of my screen, where we have campaigns to acknowledge and strive to free these warriors that's been captive. How can you have a movement and don't acknowledge that? So-and-so, brother, so-and-so, or sister lady that gets arrested in Black Lives Matter protests. I'm not talking about the organization, that's a distinction. I'm talking about the clarion call, Black Lives Matter. Poor and oppressed people's lives matter. Indigenous lives matter, brown lives matter. I'm talking about that, just like the clarion call back in our day was all power to the people. You said all power to the people didn't necessarily mean you're part of the Black Panther Party, but we all know what all power to the people meant. But we can't have a movement moving forward and demanding this and demanding that. And I'm going to bring it to a close here in a minute. When we don't, you're getting arrested and then you're forgotten. Goodbye. What does that say to somebody? Well, look here, maybe I better not do that. I can't, because there's no struggle without sacrifice. You going to prison may be a part of that. And I'm not advocating anything reckless, stupid, or reactionary at all. I'm just talking about even in Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King was in prison, and as Malcolm said, what is prison anyway? You're in prison right now. If you're in a country that's oppressing you, it's a prison in a relative way. It may not seem like that in a place called the United States of America, where we can enjoy flushing toilets and running water. I have a 4-bedroom house. I can show you that, like that. But that's on the back of, that's just a result of exploiting people all around the world, starting with the slaves brought from Africa. And it's such a complicated contradiction, as you well know, but not to get into all that, but that's how we are. So here we are now championing the same conditions that our freedom fighters that's been in prison now for decades fought for there. And if we can't make that nexus, that connection, then we're being very superficial. And your enemy that have these think tanks that know that, they know that. They know that there's no real gas in your engine, you know. And the last thing I want to say before we open up for some questions, why it's important to have an international community of support. And what Henning says, he's going to re-explain again, is that the enemy knows when you're superficial. They have people that pay, they change the shift on you. I mean, you forgot what you did last weekend. What did you do, Michael, last month, Thursday? Well, guess what? Somebody that's surveilling you, they know. They change shifts and pass your file to the next person. It's all written and recorded. And if they have to bring it up, they'll bring it up. Jimmy Blunk, okay, back in 1979, on Thursday, January, what are you talking about? Well, they have that. You don't have it. You can't even remember. We're working against a very devious, diabolical system. All right. So there's a lot of things that really, really have to be done, you know, when we're addressing this type of oppression. But like I said, not to beat a dead horse, we have to make sure this cornerstone of prisons are there. The United States government, and this is, listen, here's a teaching lesson for everybody listening. First Amendment right was not talking about the rights of Black, brown, and indigenous people at all when the Constitution written. I guess everybody knows it. It wasn't even, well, definitely wasn't talking about women. It wasn't even referring to white women at all right? A white man document. First Amendment right is free speech. Now, we've been able to bring the best out of that to a degree. We all recognize that. But built in this system here is the right to protest, even though a lot of conservatives now, as you know, Tim, you're devising laws to curtail protests. Well, that pretty soon that'll be illegal. But those are all the contradictions amongst the oppressed, and the Democrats and Republicans are arguing this, you know, like that. You know, they always say when two horses fight, the grass underneath gets trampled. So here we are getting trampled as they battle out this BS, you know, in Congress and stuff like that. But there is a built-in mechanism in this government that's very ingenious and is very insidious. If you can picture, and this, I got this analogy claiming it from Dick Gregory, who's deceased now. He was an activist and a comedian and a humanitarian. All right. He once explained in his book, Tell No Lies, No More Lies or something, a very good book. It's an old book, but yeah. He said, if you can picture a tea kettle on a stove that's boiling, on that tea kettle, there's a hole where the water boiling will always be whistling. That water boiling is synonymous with the, is an analogy about the conditions that we live in. Boiling, cardoon of oppression, police violence, marginalizations, no jobs, ghettos, underpaid, abuse of women, all these type of things is going on. That's that, and the protests of these things that are challenging these things. That's the water. That's the mix. It's boiling and it's whistling. That whistle is the government's, by their laws and policy, allowing you to be able to vent, protest, First Amendment, democracy. And they can boast about this all around the world, but that's a built-in system because they know that if you was to plug that tea kettle, boom, everything would go. Everything would go. Everything would go. Everything would go. And we will be just like an underdeveloped country with mayhem and chaos in the streets. We're almost headed that way now. If the laws continue with the repression with these reactionary white ring part of society, what they're doing now, all right? So that's built in. So it's almost an allowance. And when you get too much out of control, they'll reel you in, set you up, put you in jail. You know, okay, you out of control. All right, you're arrested, charge you with this or that. But for the most part, and there it is. And so it's good that it's there. I'd rather have it there than not there, but you need to recognize why it is there. All right. And the only way to make good on that, sisters and brothers, is the thing that a lot, and I will shut up, Mike, give me the sign. But the only thing that can really, really make a difference, and I hope we have time before the program is over to talk about the tribunal, is that we have strategies that not only protest the conditions, and I'm sure this is in Germany and everywhere else. just like the Panther Party, if you don't have a strategy, a program to develop your own communities so that we can begin to become more resilient, self-reliant, educated, morally, and I'm not using the word morals to be judgmental, but you got to have some type of character about yourself. You can't be the most debased person, immoral, and abusing women, and you're a liar. You know, you're an opportunist. So ourselves have to be a type of individual. When we say a revolutionary, you have to be that. If you're a Muslim, you have to be that. Even if you're a Christian, Jew, whatever, you have to be that. You know, and you have to be that character. But one thing that's really remiss, sisters and brothers, is the development of our own communities. Because what happens is when you don't do that and you're protesting policy after policy, what it amounts to is, in my humble opinion, and this is no slight to any activist in the street, because it takes a lot of guts to be out there doing it. And if it wasn't for you out there doing it, we would be done. So don't take it wrong. We will be done. Don't take it wrong. We will be done. Don't take it wrong. It's a sunnah in Islam to say things 3 times if you want to make the point. All right. You know, but if we're remiss if we don't develop our own communities, the world won't respect you. The world's not going to respect Black people if you don't respect yourself. And I don't like to talk about that at the same breath when we're talking about police brutality, because the detractors are quick to say that. You know what I'm saying? Oh, y'all killing yourself like that. But the reality is, you're not going to get that much respect if we don't take care of our own work. And the Black Panther Party was about taking care of our own work. That's why we had the survival programs, the free breakfast programs, the education classes, you know, death to the pusher. Can you imagine that? That's coming off strong, man. That's coming off strong. I don't know what that sounds like to you, but I'd be damned if you're going to sell them drugs in this community. And that was our position. Now our communities are rampant with drugs. Without the police bringing it in, the CIA bringing it into Compton, LA, and all these things, you got these young brothers and sisters on the corner selling drugs, and the community is horrible. And the Black Panther Party had a saying. It said 2 hurricanes can't blow at the same time. If we're in this community, we are the hurricane. And that nonsense, that reactionary lumping element, you have to hit the road, because 2 hurricanes can't blow at this. When we're here, this is how it's going to be. We're going to take brooms and we're going to clean our own streets. We're going to have our community gardens. We're going to let our culture flourish. We're going to have our arts. And young sisters will be able to walk down the streets. And young brothers will be able to walk down the streets without getting killed by another young brother. We're going to have conflict resolution centers, you know, where we can come in a safe space, just like we did in prison, where you can resolve your beefs. That is revolution. And without that, then you're always going to be kissing somebody behind, asking to change the policy, hoping that that the slave master will tell the overseer not to beat you so bad in the field where you die. That's my take on it. And if we don't have the vision, if we don't have the wherewithal, and I'm talking to the movements now, and Henning, that's why, once again, for the 3rd time, I think, the International Day of Political Prisoners, if we don't have this international connection, sisters and brothers, then 5, 10 years from now, because it's very possible that the right-wing forces can get very strong, stronger than you can imagine, you know, so you don't want that to happen. So we just have to have that vision, and maybe before the program is over, we can talk about what Tim and I think that vision could be, because we do have a very, very concrete strategy going on now that really shows a serious promise for maybe the first time in a very long time. The first time in a very long time where we can bring not only activists and revolutionaries together, but where we can merge into liberal mainstream society. Don't worry, it's okay. We're talking about your parents, by the way. The ones that's not a part of the movement that you're in the same house with that don't know what you're doing. Okay, I'm talking about them. So when I say mainstream liberal society, I'm talking about your relatives that are not even connected with anything that you're doing. Okay, so don't blow me out because I mentioned that. That's everybody else. And if they're not mainstream liberal society, they're aspiring to be that. And they're aspiring to be that through their ignorance because they're not political. If they were political, we have a bigger movement. We don't have a bigger movement, so there you go. All right, so there, I know, there you go. It's all connected. You know, so this strategy is designed to take our revolutionary integrity, our revolutionary acumen, our discipline, our beliefs, our ideas, and educate the person next to you. And that's mainstream society. It's not just talking in a silo to ourselves, preaching to the choir. You got an audience of nothing but revolutionaries that already understand what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah, Michael. Yeah, yeah, Stella. Yeah, yeah, Henning. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, and the rest of the world is watching Netflix, going shopping, and looking for the next party for the weekend, and waiting for the next person to get shot in the back by the police. And so I'm going to stop talking right now in case there are questions. Tim, I don't know if you want to segue to Stella or whatever. I probably said too much. If I offended anybody, I apologize. Sometimes I get off the hook a little bit, you know, but it's out of love and respect and sincerity. Hopefully you can catch the good points that I said, and if I was too sarcastic sometime, excuse me, that's just how I am, rolling like that. So love and peace, and I greet you with assalamu alaikum again, and I stand ready to answer questions.
Well, that was what we used to hear in Lewisburg, some of the organizational functions. Jihad was always a teacher, an imam, and would be teaching us at every turn. And you haven't lost any of your fire, brother. You haven't lost any of your fire. And thank you for that. I think it would be great if we could open it up to questions. I don't know if we have the ability to field questions from people who are out there listening. I know Henning and Jihad and myself are able to answer anything, but perhaps Michael or maybe Henning, maybe do you have things that you'd like to respond to based on what we've been talking about? Sure, Henning, go ahead.
Ja, Stella, ich bin dankbar, wenn du wieder kurz übersetzen könntest. Also, ich fand beide Redebeiträge wirklich beeindruckend. Da war ganz viel Information für mich drin und natürlich fühlt man, dass da revolutionäre Überzeugung drin steckt. Und das ist gut zu hören. Ne? Irgendwie auf die so große Distanz sind wir uns eigentlich so nah. Und das finde ich toll. Ich möchte nochmal darauf eingehen, was Jihad gesagt hat. Ich fand den Vergleich mit dem Teekessel sehr gut, weil ich glaube, dass es genauso ist. Und wir als Rote Hilfe sind immer da. Wir sind da, wenn Menschen einfach, ja, vielleicht irgendwie Grenzen überschreiten. Ne? Das war ja so ein bisschen das Bild. Sich Freiräume erkämpfen wollen, um eben gegen Faschisten, gegen Krieg, gegen Diskriminierung auf die Straße zu gehen. Und ich glaube, genau das ist unsere Aufgabe. Und ich fand es sehr stark auch zu sagen, dass wenn neue Bewegungen entstehen, wie jetzt Black Lives Matter, mein größter Respekt und meine größte Solidarität zu dieser Bewegung, dass sie, genau wie wir alle, nicht vergessen dürfen, dass es immer noch Menschen in den Gefängnissen gibt, die genau für die gleiche Sache gekämpft haben und für deren Freiheit wir kämpfen müssen. Aus unterschiedlichen Kontexten, aber im Prinzip geht es immer um das Gleiche. Menschen kämpfen für die Freiheit, Menschen werden inhaftiert. Jede neue Bewegung, die kommt, darf sie nicht vergessen und muss für ihre Freiheit streiten. Und das fand ich ein wirklich sehr schönes Bild. Das gibt mir sehr viel Kraft.
Okay, so first of all, a big compliment from Henning to both of your speech. To your speeches, there was a lot of information that he found very interesting, and it's interesting to see how close you are over such big distances, like the continental distances, obviously. He really likes the comparison with the tea kettle because he believes it is just like that, and just as you said, the Rote Hilfe is always there when people push boundaries and cross borders and limits and everything, and fight for rights and against racism and fascism and sexism and everything. And also to connect with what you said, Jihad, much respect and solidarity to Black Lives Matter, but he fully agrees on that. You should never forget that people are behind walls and in prisons. And it will always be that way as long as people fight for freedom. As long as people fight for their freedom, there will be people getting arrested and getting put into prison. So as time goes on and this repeats itself, you should never forget that.
I think that, thank you, Stella, and thank you, Henning. I think just if I make a comment that just even reinforcing that again in another way, that freeing acknowledging political prisoners, and doing whatever you can from whatever space you're working from to support campaigns that free them, because your organization may not be situated or set up within your mission to deal with it. I understand. But even the minimum of putting a name of a prisoner or a link to an organization on your website that does support political prisoners, and so not taking away from anything that you may be doing in the community or other issues. Maybe it is dealing with the police directly, or mass incarceration, or hyper incarceration, or dealing with the 13th Amendment of slavery in prison, which is a real thing. But just to be able to say that here's a link to National Jerichomovement, or here's a link, to the Malcolm X grassroots movement, or here's a link to the Black Alliance for Peace, or here's a link to the Black is Back Coalition. Here's a link to somewhere or something that's going to give you more information, and you can direct people that, even as that, because supporting political prisoners have to be a part of the infrastructure of a movement, if I can put it that way. Does that sound good, Tim? It has to be part of the infrastructure, the very foundation of a movement, not just something, okay, we'll do. But even though it may not be something that you actually do as an organization, because all the organizations have different focuses, that all of them are very important in our movement. But you recognizing that is very important. You cannot leave a freedom fighter to rot in prison or abandoned. And we might die in prison. I mean, in the Quran, there's a verse that says, "Inna Allahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." From Allah we came, and to Him we shall return. Is recognizing the fact that death is inevitable. Chairman Mao Zedong said that death will befall all of us. Some of our deaths may be as weighty as Mount Tai, and others may be light as a feather. Those that work and strive for the people, make those sacrifices, their death is weighty as Mount Tai. Those that are reactionaries and support the forces of oppression, their death is light as a feather. And so there is a distinction there, but we recognize, Mumia recognizes, Maroon Schultz recognizes, Leonard Peltier recognizes, all of the freedom fighters that are incarcerated, everybody, Imam Jamil Alameen, Mutulu Shakur, Sundiata Kohli, everybody recognizes that death is inevitable. We're freedom fighters. We're not cowards up in these prisons. And even though we're getting old and we have infirmities and our health is failing, and that's, 50 years is ridiculous on any standard on the planet Earth, and the only resolution for that is freedom. When we started this, we knew that we might die. We might have died by a bullet on the street when we was in our 20s. Now that we're in our 70s and 80s, we might die in a bed. No revolutionary really wants to do that sick in prison. But I'd be daggone if you don't understand that's the reality, that doesn't take any weight off or anything off the plate in terms of what we should be doing. But we should be building a movement where we can enforce a demand, not implement a beg. It's a difference.
I think that's really brilliantly said. I also wanted to speak. You said like the resources that exist within the prison. I don't know a lot of us in the movement understand, what a loss it is when a freedom fighter is captured. When these activists, who are often the most courageous, or people who are sort of the most advanced in terms of their analysis or study and experience as either mass organizers or they're folks who have often a deep wealth of experience, and you, as a movement, you don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose access to that. And I know that everyone who goes to visit people who are the political prisoners, anybody who goes to visit Sundiata, or anybody who goes to, especially Mumia, folks who go to visit people like Mumia, Sundiata, they come back and they always say the same thing, is feel like no, this brother is like more positive and more full of life than anybody I know on the street, and they come back energized and like they're ready to like tear down walls and shit. It's like it's amazing some of the life force that people build for themselves as prisoners inside, and you don't want to lose that connection to that, because it's vital for the movement. The other thing that I would just say that I think I can tell you from my own experience, because I was arrested twice. The first time I did time was for it was after a protest that the police beat me and beat me some more, man. It was like they just had to stop and smoke a cigarette before they got tired, and they had to come back and like start all over again once they got the feel for it. But I ended up doing about 11 months in the New York State system. And what happened for me though was in the first arrest was crucial to my development as a person and as a revolutionary. And what happened was I lost my fear of prison. And I now was dealing as a much freer person. You lose your fear of prison when you connect to the political prisoners. And what happens then is you can make decisions. You don't have to necessarily make a decision to go underground or take it to the furthest extent. But once you have learned that you can do time, that there are people on the street that will support you, there are organizations that have your back, that you're tapping into a connection with activists who have gone before you and who will come after you, and that you're part of this movement that is willing to take these extraordinary steps as seem to be needed, then it's your own liberation you're talking about. You've now taken away from the enemy the thing that they mostly hold over us, is the fear of doing time, the fear of doing prison, the fear of being separated from the community. And once you are able to breach that hurdle, you're able to take that step forward, you're liberated to make choices for yourself and for the movement that you could not possibly have made before. And that's only possible if you know that other people have your back. So that's I think also critical in how we think about building our movement and with supporting the political prisoners in mind. That makes sense?
Yeah, I think just by involvement, first what I'm hearing you saying, Timmy, by your involvement in the movement, and then when something happens as a consequence to that, the fact that you know that you are supported and that you're not isolated and alone, that emboldens you in that builds your courage. You understand that, and I agree with I remember Huey Newton, who was the founder, and Bobby Seale, the founders of the Black Panther Party. He's saying like, prison, where's that victory? Remember that? Yeah. And so, you can incarcerate my body, but my mind is free. And so that's your education and your involvement, theory and practice. We all know the drill, theory and practice, but we have to represent, what we are doing. Mm-hmm. I would like, if I may, could Henning, is this a good time for you to revisit the International Day of Support of Political Prisoners again, so I can get that information, and the audience can also?
Klar. Was genau ist gemeint mit Informationen über den 18. März?
What information exactly do you want, Jihad?
I mean, just tell me what it is again and how long. You mentioned something about 25 years, and just tell me about it, and how can other organizations from the United States be connected with that, and so our actions of support can be some type of way reciprocal, all right, even in just acknowledging.
Okay. Sehr gerne. Der 18. März ist ein Tag, an dem die Pariser Kommune ausgerufen wurde, 1871. Das war der erste sozialistische Versuch damals, ne, als die Pariser Bevölkerung auf die Straße ging, sich gegen die Herrschenden aufbegehrt hat und versucht hat, eben ne, die kapitalistische aufkommende Herrschaft zu überwinden. Diese Kommune wurde niedergeschlagen. Es gab so viele Verletzte und Tote, aber er ging in die Geschichte der internationalen Arbeiterbewegung ein. Und es war die kommunistische Internationale, ne? Es war auch die Sowjetunion, die dann gesagt hat, der 18. März ist ab diesem Datum auch der Tag der politischen Gefangenen. Und diese Tradition haben wir in den 90er Jahren wieder aufgegriffen. Und seitdem machen wir sehr viele Veranstaltungen mit sehr unterschiedlichem Charakter. Ja? Also manche treffen sich einfach, wenn vielleicht auch kein Corona ist, treffen sich vielleicht einfach in einer Kneipe und schreiben Postkarten an die Gefangenen. Wir veröffentlichen zum Beispiel in unserer Zeitung Adressen. Ja? Und dann werden einfach Briefe geschrieben. Andere machen Demonstrationen und fordern die Freilassung von Antifaschisten, von Menschen aus der Klimabewegung oder anderen oder auch den kurdischen Genossinnen. Und dieser Aktionstag, den gibt es inzwischen auch in anderen Ländern. In der Türkei zum Beispiel wird das inzwischen auch wieder aufgegriffen. Und wenn wir über den heutigen Tag es schaffen würden, in Kontakt zu bleiben und zu sagen, lass uns das im nächsten Jahr zusammen machen. Ja, also wir machen zum Beispiel Veranstaltungen auch natürlich für Mumia, ne? Hier in Deutschland. Und nehmen wir an, lasst uns zum Beispiel eine Videokonferenz machen oder lasst uns eine Live-Schaltung von einer Demonstration machen zusammen. Ja, dann schaffen wir eine internationale Verbindung, die dann noch stärker wird und die diesen Aktionstag für die politischen Gefangenen noch internationaler macht und ja, und dadurch noch mehr Wirkung entfaltet. Ich finde das gut, dass du das nochmal aufgegriffen hast. Lass uns das zusammen machen. Also wir können diese Veranstaltung heute als einen Auftakt begreifen, in Kontakt zu bleiben und uns einfach immer mal wieder austauschen, was gerade passiert in unseren jeweiligen Kämpfen und schauen, dass wir sowas zusammen realisieren. Wir würden uns sehr darüber freuen. Und wenn das gelingt, dann sind wir einen Schritt weiter, glaube ich.
Okay, so the International Day of Political Prisoners. So the 18th of March is the day in which the Parisian Commune was declared in 1871, which was the first socialist try to abolish the capitalist regime and society, but it was destroyed in some way. There were many dead people, many injured people, but nonetheless it stayed in the working community, also in the Soviet Union, and then became the International Day of Political Prisoners. And the Rote Hilfe revisited that tradition in the 1990s. And they do a lot of events, like for instance, some people just simply meet up in bars or restaurants and write postcards to political prisoners. The Rote Hilfe, for instance, publishes addresses of those political prisoners in their newspaper. Others organize demonstrations and demand the freedom of political prisoners who might be incarcerated for fighting for anti-fascism or for climate or anti-racism and everything. And this day also exists in other countries, for instance, in Turkey. So it would be really great if it would be possible to stay in contact and work together to make this day more international. For instance, the Rote Hilfe also does actions for Mumia, for example. So it would be really nice to maybe work together for the next International Day, so 18th of March next year. Whether that be doing like a video conference or streaming a demonstration or whatever, it would just give a stronger international connection, and then that there would be more effect in following that. So we can see today as like the beginning of a stronger exchange for the two movements and the fighters. And let's stay in touch to, you know, update each other on what's happening in the different fights. So it would be great to work together for the next day and coming forth.
Okay, yes, indeed. Thank you. I think that goes into the whole question and the necessity of genuine, sincere international solidarity. You know, even though it's reflecting itself by movements and not necessarily governments at all, but movements and the people are doing their busy work on the ground to make those vital connections from one country to the next. Just as the forces of reaction do the same thing. They do it on the governmental level, in spite of their contradictions, they always, and this is just what we know. You know, I can only imagine the things that we don't know, the sophistication of their unity and working together, the skullduggery, the intrigue that goes behind everything that they do, these powers that be, when they meet to make sure that the conditions in their country remain just so, that the rich remain rich, that the wealth remain in the hands of the few, and that the most majority of the people, you know, are laboring all their life, and they do all the things necessary to keep that status quo. I wanted to, Michael, if it's okay, brother, to just, you know, spend about a good 5-10 minutes talking about the tribunal. I think that the world needs to know what we're doing here in the United States. October 2021, October, the weekend of the 23rd, 24th, and 25th here in the United States, virtual and live in New York City. We're holding a tribunal. Now, we know the word tribunal has been used quite a bit lately. Well, actually, there's many tribunals throughout history. So we stand on the shoulders of those past tribunals. But I want to point out there's some fundamental differences that are very exciting, and I hope they'll be exciting to you about this tribunal. So Jalil, talking about political prisoner that was released, Jalil Muntaqim, before he was released, of the many ideas, and this just shows you, as Timmy said, you know, the life and energy coming from behind the wall. Now, he, make a long story short, he called for developing a coalition to support political prisoners in bringing in the Mandela rules, which talk about a certain standard of condition for prisoners of war. That coalition was called In the Spirit of Mandela. Out of that coalition came the idea of a tribunal. And here's the difference. And listeners, you need to take a piece of paper. Don't just listen to this. You got to write this, because this is fundamental. All right. This is the big deal. This is an organizing tool. This tribunal is charging the United States government with 6 categories of charges, all of which have been charged before. It's been adjudicated before. It's been protested before. It's been struggled against before. Nothing in the charges are new. You know, there's 6 charges. We're charging police violence against Black, brown, and indigenous people. And number 2, we're charging hyper or mass incarceration of Black, brown, and indigenous people, including, you know, the reality of the removal of the 13th Amendment in actuality, which allows for slavery to continue. We abolish slavery, but yeah, guess what? You get arrested, it continues, as so authorized by the United States Constitution. The 3rd charge is the holding of political prisoners. That's focused right in the middle there. The 4th one is just charging environmental racism and how it impacts poor and oppressed people, all right? Black, brown, and indigenous people specifically. And the 5th one is health disparities and racism in the health, and the 400 years of trauma and how that's even is reflected in our communities, our lifestyles, not just access to our hospitals or clinics and medical care and information and education, and the racism inherent in that. The 6th charge is charging genocide, which we know we're charging that mostly for the the reality of it is they're killing us in small numbers. The intent to kill, wipe out, exterminate, to control, to eliminate in whole or in part, the race of Africans brought here in the United States. All right, just as they decimated the indigenous tribes and nations that existed here in the United States. Those are the 6 charges. All of that has been adjudicated in many different venues before. Am I right, Tim? All of that. It is absolutely nothing new. You can go to any progressive library. You can go to just a county library and pull out books and reams of information of all these. And it's constantly in the same issues that's in the streets today that you can hear internationally echoed through the Black Lives Matter movement, carried from the Black Liberation Movement, carried from the Civil Rights Movement, carried from the movements before that, and the movement all the way to the slave rebellions and 300 years ago. All right. What's different here is the outcomes, to strategic, calculated outcomes. This is not like into a Thanksgiving dinner where you put so much into the shopping and the cooking and everybody's there. And now after everybody betook of the meal, you fall out and absolutely nothing is done. It was so daggone exhausting. We got our documents as a result of the tribunal. The jurists, we have about 15 jurists coming in, many from overseas. A lot of it might be virtual now. It's clear because of the COVID, but now because of the COVID, it just may be virtual. A lot of that anyway. 13 jurists hearing these cases, all right? And coming up with the verdict, but it is led by an attorney by the name of Nkechi Taifa in New York, African-American woman. And so we're going to have a Stella legal team to present this. We'll be calling witnesses, impacted witnesses, expert witnesses on all these categories right here. There's no celebrity speaking activists. There's nobody making speeches. This is a tribunal. It is a trial as such, even though it is void of an adversarial component, but that is indeed going to follow. So it is a trial, it is for the education, but most importantly, sisters and brothers, it is the mass organizing leading up to the tribunal. We are calling for, in participation and endorsements, hundreds of thousands of people. That's never been done by revolutionaries, not in the United States. I mean, not with the intent of organizing. That's why I mentioned a while ago, reaching into mainstream society, bringing them into the process. It's a legal, political process. It is a vehicle. It is a nodal point, place in time, if you can follow me, that where there's all this organizing that's going on, because the outcomes of this tribunal is very unique. Okay, so first of all, the obvious things, we're going to codify this information, Tim, right? And it's going to be published. Hopefully it'll be able to be accessible in universities and libraries all across the United States. We're going to canalize all this information that's already been out there in so many books. Okay, so there you go. So that's going to happen. That's a natural, so we'll be providing accurate, legal, vetted out, fact-checked information on all these charges. It'll give fuel for renewed efforts on all reparation initiatives. There was a point in time that Dr. Matula Shakur had called for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that'll be held to bring light on the political prisoners so we can really look at under a microscope why they're there with the result of freeing them, all right? Very important here is that afterwards we'll be calling for a People's Senate. The establishment of a People's Senate across all 50 states, all indigenous tribes and major religious organizations. All right, this is very unique. Not a third party. We have in the United States, you have the Democrat and Republican Party. We're not going to have another party and add to the fray, take away, and then take away from the liberal Democrats, the liberals, and then have some reactionary Republican get in because you have a third party, you got 30,000 votes. Okay. Yeah, anyway, so, and I'm not, maybe I shouldn't have said it like that, but we got to think this shit through, man. You know what I mean? So, but so People's Senate is different. So we're kind of building the car as we're driving it, okay? That we know that we're going to have, and I want your take on this, Henning, or if you don't mind, When it's over, we're going to realize we're going to have conventions in different regional areas. You know, not telling how we may actually do this. I said 50 states, representation, all 50 states, and true representation, and get them. That's why we're organizing so much leading up to the tribunal being a nodal point right there. We're going to air out these, but it's just an event to focus on as we organize. And as a result of this event, and whatever happens up, you know, the publications and the verdict read it before the UN and all of these type of things, then afterwards we would have established and set the stage because of the organizing that's been done to mobilize mass numbers of people that the left movement in the United States has not been able to do. Not in a visionary thing, and not comparing it to activists and movements in the street that are spontaneous as a result of some murder, you know, the protests, you know, or a war like the Vietnamese war protests, you know how huge they were. The 15th of every month was more moratorial, stuff like that. But this is a building process. It's not a protesting process. If you can see the difference of this. And we know that having the people Senate, somehow or another, it gets down to this. We're going to have to be able to organize and influence and educate the people of a place called the United States of America. Otherwise, as I said earlier, when two horses fight, when the reactionary forces compete with one another, right-wing conservative reactionary forces that raided the Capitol building, that whole ilk, this is versus the liberal society, which is the mainstream society that's kind of working and moving. And then how can we leverage that? How can we get in, Timmy? How can we get in to really influence people? That means that individuals like myself, coming out of a movement of the Black Liberation Army, we're going to have to cultivate what we say. We're going to tweak what we say so that we can really educate people and bring them into this revolutionary process. We're going to explain it in different creative ways. Otherwise, it's just like what they said, the definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. You know, we can't keep doing that. And so we're looking at this whole thing, and it's a people's process. Like, again, I said, inviting people in. We have a meeting tomorrow, the third Saturday of every month, where people can hear what's being said. They can join the committees. It's not a thing where a couple lawyers get in a room and write an indictment, have a tribunal because of the virtual ability of Zoom and all this. You can hear it and look at it and be excited about it. You were not part of that process. You don't even know what's going to happen as a result of that process. Somebody takes the papers to some room on the third floor of the United Nations by the bathroom, by the elevator, and you never know what happens. I can tell you what happens because I've been to the UN numerous times, in Geneva and in Manhattan. And I know what happens. Nothing happens, and you know it too. You know it too. So you do all this work, all this legal work, you present the documentation, they're committing genocide. Yes, you signed the petitions, but there has to be a vision. There has to be a mobilization of actual action that people can relate to, not run from, but relate to and be a part of. You know, so, and this is going to be very important because I'm not on the page of the sky is falling, oh my God, they're killing us, this is going to happen in the next 2 years. I'm not on that page. Matter of fact, Allah has all control. I don't know, that's not the, it's just the fact that we know that we have to organize on a different level. And that does not mean that you and your organization and anybody listening abandon what your organization mission is, the work that you do in the community. It has nothing to do with that. We're not saying leave what you're doing and come here. It says be part of what's going here and continue to do what you're doing. But you have to be, you must be a part of this. This is an opportunity. This tribunal is an opportunity to let the world, it's an international tribunal, to let the world know in documented, vetted, fact-check manner on a stage. You can call it political theater, whatever you want to call it. I'm a playwright. But you have to be able to let people see it for what it is. Captured just like that. People listening that really didn't believe that this is happening. Just like George Floyd's death woke up a lot of people that didn't even believe white racism exists. Now people are questioning that. And this is, I'm sorry for, unfortunately on the back of this dear brother, but like his daughter said, daddy changed the whole world. You know, that sister, the name escapes me, George Floyd's daughter said that, and it's so true. They got the murals of George Floyd all around the world, you know, and if you ever saw the movie Spook Who Sat by the Door, which you haven't, you should see it written by Sam Greenlee. These brothers, they were guerrillas. They trained themselves and ready for whatever. They were cocked and ready for a revolution. Whatever there was the spark that ignited this prairie fire. And you know what the spark was? The shooting of a drug dealer by the police. So you never know what's going to really tip the scale of mayhem. But I know one thing for sure, you better be prepared. You better be prepared on a level that we're not. So last thing I want to say about this tribunal, it sets the stage for that type of organizing that we haven't seen before. It takes us out of our silos of the organizations that we're dealing with. It opens up, it creates an environment for us to be able to do other things that we've been calling for, like even the Republic of New Africa, free the land, raising your own flag. Well, this sets a stage. This sets a stage where hopefully it can raise a level of consciousness massive enough across the United States, you know, where these other initiatives, historically time appropriate, can be implemented. You know, because other than that, if you think that you're going to wait till depression gets so bad, they say oppression breeds resistance. Well, that's true in a relative way, but oppression can cause your extermination too. You're going to rise up under the embers of a place called the United States, and I'll disconnect you. You're tripping. Now, you may find an enclave down somewhere in some part of the country, run and hide and be ready in case they come, grow your own food. That's good. Maybe we need to do that. But in the meantime, what are we going to do to be proactive to try to level the playing field, educate enough people so that we can have a protective buffer of consciousness that doesn't exist right now, so that we can be able to have a larger microphone to have another narrative. That's what this whole thing is about. So there it is. So we, I guess I can let Michael and Stella know. I think I sent you that information. How, and Henning, if you don't have it, I'll make sure you have it. However, in your circles that you can amplify this. I sent you the information sheet. I'll send it again. But for our sisters and brothers in the United States, this is the calling. You know, this is an opportunity. And because of the Black Lives Matter, because of not so much the Black Lives Matter movement, unfortunately, because of the murders and the awakening consciousness that's happening by seeing all this stuff televised on TV, the people are more prone to listen to what you have to say. And as Bobby Seale once said, we really have to seize the time. Or as I mentioned, the spooker sat by the door, you know, he made a comment to one of his comrades, you know, about the reality of the harshness of this struggle. You either reckon with this, or you can go back to doing nothing. You can go back to beating your head against the wall and expecting for a different result. And I'm not, and you can call me being sarcastic if you want, but the tale of the tape is clear. It's 2021. I robbed banks to free the land, the money, and we don't have an apartment to account for. Now call me shit. Spent 2 decades of my life fighting for this. Call me shit. You think I'm jiving? Everybody that's not even political has land now, except the revolutionaries. Everybody political has land. They went on and did their thing. We're so muffled and bridled by our own ideology, we can't even go to the refrigerator to get a piece of chicken together without arguing and fighting. You call me shit, because you know I ain't jiving. You know I ain't jiving. If we don't come up with a different plan, and this is a plan. This is a plan, P-L-A-N, plan. And we're asking people to be down with it. It's not an individual plan, it's not my plan. I'm just a worker in the plan. It's not my plan. It's not based upon any one person or anything like that. You know, we're gonna get down. This is an opportunity for us to really organize. It's not stated in, I know I'm gonna belabor the point where you lose the point, so I'll shut up in a minute. It's not worded in such a way, and with a lot of thought. We have some real good comrades with this. We have Sekou Dinga, Aisha Muhammad, Taisha and Ichi Taifa. We have Matt Meyer. We have some Ann Lamb. We have some serious sisters and brothers that's well trained in the movement working this. Eileen Weitzman. We have some stellar lawyers, King Downey, you know, that's working in this whole process, getting it together. It's not just me. So there's no ego in this. Nobody's claiming it. Yeah, man, you know, no, so you can forget that. This is a really true people's process. We're vulnerable. We're open to criticism. We're open to your input. You're just transparent. We're $25 an endorsement. Get your $25. But when you talk about 200,000 people endorsing something, now you're talking about do the math times 25 times. So in that budget is necessary because once this tribunal is over, we got all these high-class lawyers doing all this pro bono work. But when it's over, who's going to lobby Congress? Who's going to introduce these cases, you know, for maybe civil cases? And we are going to go after the civil case too. So I said, okay, yeah, it's a human rights show, but it's civil rights too. Because even when a police kills a brother or sister in the street, you know, and they're not even indicted, a couple of months later, the family, George Floyd got $20 million. I mean, it's divided between the city, the lawyer, and the family. Breonna Taylor got $12 million. And so you can't discount that. Well, I know the money doesn't compensate for the loss of, we know it. I ain't got to play games with you. I'm just talking real talk. You can't negate the civil stuff because you might have to take things into court one after another. That's how we got Mumia his treatment. Those lawsuits, working with the attorneys from the Abolitionist Law Center, Brett Rote, all of them. And so you can't, we're really working this, sisters and brothers, you know, how our language, I can get real militant. I can talk that, you know, what's the definition of a pig? A foul in nature beast that goes around masquerading as a victim of an unprovoked attack. I can spit that Panther stuff if you want to hear it. I can sound as militant and revolutionary, and you can pat me on my back for telling the truth, Jihad, and I'll be damned if somebody's going to do what I said. I can go real hard. You want me to go hard? I can go hard until they have to block this thing on YouTube, if you want me to. And we'll be right where we are. We got a couple of comrades around you sending me emails about how you sounded all tough and like that in mainstream society, and your mother and your grandmother and your aunt, your uncle, they're not even listening to you. You scared everybody away from the picnic. I've done it, I know. I've been there. I know, and my whole family was scared to death of me. I was like, I said, oh God, is that him? And that's when I was 16. And you would not want me sitting in your living room when I was 24, talking about free political prisoners. You'd be scared to death. I know what time it is. And if you're not ready to go through tell me, give me the high side, Michael, if I'm talking too much. I know what time it is. Are you suited and booted for this struggle? And I'm talking to the activists. So when the police hit you upside your head on the street corner demonstration and put you in jail, hey, it smells pepper gas. Okay. Okay. Do you forget the beast that you was protesting against? You're expecting him to be humane because you're on the street corner? Rubber bullets and all? Ask the Palestinian sisters and brothers. They know what time it is. If you ain't ready to pay them dues, as Malcolm said, you need to get out the way because you're blocking this. This is called, and so this tribunal is just it's an opportunity for us to go kind of like into it like that. We don't have to go like that. We can go like this, like a mudslide. I mean, it looked like a little bit of mud, but as it gets momentum coming down that hill, you won't be able to stop it, and neither will the state. And this is the opportunity to do that. Or you can go back and talk as militant as hell on your next program and be satisfied with 70 people listening and thinking that you did something. And it's the same 70 people at that. Nobody else is listening that's new. This is a lesson that I learned from penitentiary life and from, you know, I can go home and I got a beautiful wife. I got 4 kids. I got 4 grandkids. I love my family. I can go back and turn on the TV after every demonstration and watch Jason Bourne kill a bunch of people, whatever the case may be, and do what everybody else did. But as George Jackson said, after that demonstration is over, you better be ready to put in some serious work. And like I said, this tribunal is giving you an opportunity to be part of this mudslide that's going to push things straight out the way, level the playing field, without even necessarily firing a bullet at this time.
Ich glaube, das war die motivierendste Rede, die ich seit langem gehört habe. Ich freue mich darauf, mehr davon zu hören. Ich kann gar nicht auf alles eingehen, was du gerade gesagt hast, lieber Genosse. ich muss sagen, ich glaube, dass wir in Kontakt bleiben. Ich glaube, so viel haben wir heute ausgemacht miteinander und wir haben viel voneinander gehört. Ich zumindest habe eine Menge gelernt. Ich werde mich langsam ausklinken müssen. Hier wird es spät und lasst uns die Zusammenarbeit vertiefen, wie gesagt. Lasst uns bald wieder voneinander hören. Ich für meinen Teil verabschiede mich für heute Abend und bedanke mich für die Möglichkeit, mit euch zu sprechen. Bedanke mich für das Organisieren dieser Veranstaltung und die tolle Übersetzung.
Henning, bleib noch 2 Minuten noch drin, Stella übersetzt noch deine Sache, dann sage ich noch was und dann ist, glaube ich, auch durch. Aber natürlich erstmal herzlichen Dank auch dir für dein Kommen, sehr spontan. Wir hatten heute noch telefoniert und ja, den Kontakt, also ich gebe den Kontakt durch. Ich bräuchte noch von dir die E-Mail-Adresse dann und auch das mit dem Tribunal, da habe ich Informationen da. Aber auch zu dem 18. März würde ich dann, das können wir mal wann anders machen. Genau, lasst uns ruhig mal wirklich so auch in Kontakt bleiben. Okay, Stella, vielleicht noch kurz in Abschlussübersetzung für Timo.
Okay, so first, what Henning said is it was the most motivating speech he's heard in a long time, and he's very excited to hear more. And he personally learned a lot, and he's very certain that he'll stay in contact just because we open up so much tonight in this talk, and he's really excited for what's to come. But because it's getting super late in Germany, he's going to leave now. And Michael will also share the contact between you two and give information about the tribunal and the 18th of March and everything. So thank you for coming. We're going to wrap up like now because it is getting late. And yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your contributions. It was a really great opportunity. And yeah.
Ja, jetzt ist es, glaube ich, an mir kurz. Ich weiß nicht, Tim vielleicht noch was, so Jihad. Hier ist es Mitternacht. Ich glaube, es waren 2 intensive Stunden. Und weiß nicht, ob Henning jetzt noch da ist, aber auf jeden Fall war es großartig, dass er kam. Das war relativ spontan. Die Sache, Rote Hilfe ist eine sehr bekannte, in Deutschland sehr bekannte Bewegung. Jihad, ja, das war, und Tims waren sehr beeindruckende Beiträge, sehr deutlich, sehr klar, so was ich immer meine, aus dem Hochauthentischen heraus. Und ich denke, wir haben hier eine ganz gute Runde gestartet für die nächste Zeit, das nächste Jahr für Zusammenarbeit, wie Henning ja auch schon sagte, für eine internationale, größere Zusammenarbeit mit der Roten Hilfe auch und euch. Ne? Okay, so Stella for the last words, or Tim, then Jihad.
Okay, so it is midnight here, so we're going to wrap up. I think it was 2 very intense hours. Thank you so much to Henning for coming. It was a relatively spontaneous thing. And the Rote Hilfe is very known in Germany, so thanks a lot for coming. And Jihad and Tim, thank you so much for your contribution. It was really impressive contributions. It's really clear and really authentic, which is what he talked about in the beginning, in the very beginning. I think we started a good group and a good opportunity to grow upon and keep working with it. So Tim, Jihad, if you want to say any last words.
No, I just thank you, Stella. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Henning, and my dear comrade, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity. And again, you know, I know sometimes I'm be talking fast, but I meant everything I said. And I just pray that that we are motivated enough to some action. I look forward to our interaction with each other, and my prayers to everybody that's been, you know, victimized by the COVID-19 and atrocities of government inaction, and prayers and thoughts going out to our Palestinian comrades, sisters, and brothers, and everybody that's fighting against oppression all around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michal and Stella for this, and to Henning. And I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a long-term collaboration on behalf of political prisoners in the future from Europe and the United States, Africa, Asia. This is what we do. This is solidarity in action, and this is how we make it happen. So I'm grateful for this opportunity, and we will make it happen. We will do this.
Mhm.
Nice last words. We will make it happen. Yeah, let's make it happen. That's why we started the Fire Across the Poems too, didn't we? It's a happening. So we start to happen, let it happen. Yeah. Ja, Henning, großen Dank. Bist du doch noch da? Freut mich.
Ja, ich bin auch da. Ich bedanke mich bei euch.
Ich sag so, und ich weiß nicht, schickst du mir eine E-Mail noch oder du hast meine E-Mail, glaube ich, Henning. Und dann bringe ich alles zusammen. Ich habe mir auch ein paar Notizen gemacht für Radio, vielleicht für Ausstellungen, Theater und so on. Auch Zusammenarbeit würde ich versuchen. Im Tribunal und den 18.03. auf jeden Fall auch nächstes Jahr. Okay.
This gave me the idea, Jihad, that